Hello, my name is Rachel, and today I'm going to be doing a combo wrap-up. The last wrap-up that I posted on this channel before I took a bit of a break was in August, so today I'm going to be doing September and October wrap-up for you. So these are in no particular order, so let's just jump in. So first off, over the span of the 2 months, I completed the Shadow House trilogy by Dan Pawlowski. There is the first book that is called The Gathering. There's the second book that is called You Can't Hide. And the final, which I'm assuming is the final book in the series, book number 3, which is called No Way Out. The main reason I got into this series is because Dan Pawlowski came to our school when this first book was released and did a chat with all of the kids and did a book signing, and it was pretty exciting. So we were all very, very excited for this release. If you don't know, if you haven't heard, it's basically the story of these kids, and I think there's like 5 or 6 of them, that all meet up at this house for various reasons. For instance, one of them thinks it's going to be a music school where his kind of freakishly good abilities are going to be utilized and expanded. One of them thinks that the owner of the school is her blood relative and she's going to be able to leave her orphanage, and so on. All of them have various reasons for believing they're supposed to be there, and they're all different. Once they get there and start figuring this out and realize that they might be in trouble, they've already gotten into the house, and the house locks them in. And the house then starts taking on all these characteristics of things that will scare them. They actually even have some former tenants who appear frequently throughout the book to terrorize these kids. So it's pretty startling, but it is kind of a neat adventure. So book 1 and 2 were rereads for me these 2 months, and then book 3 was for the first time. I just wanted kind of to get the whole experience while I finished up the series. So for book 1, I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was pretty entertaining, but I wanted more out of the book. For book 2, I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. It seemed kind of repetitive and a little bit less exciting, and this one definitely was a little bit darker because of something that has happened to one of the characters. And then finally in book 3, I gave this one 2 out of 5 stars. I didn't quite enjoy it. I think honestly this would have been better as maybe one collective book, because book 1 just seemed too short and the other 2 books just seemed too repetitive. So I think maybe as one whole book, this might have gotten a higher rating for me, or at least if it was 2 books. So I'm not sure, but it was interesting to read, and they're super, super quick. One thing that I absolutely did love about this series, though, where there are little icons throughout the book, and you could use those to activate extra content on your cell phone through an app, and that was so much fun. I'm not really sure why they left it all online. They could have probably gotten another book out of that material, but it was still really fun to do, and I'm glad I've read this series now. Next up, I read Easy by Tamara Weber. This story revolves around the main character who is attacked right at the onset of this book, and the boy who kind of comes to her rescue, and then the story of them moving forward in this scenario. And I liked that we had kind of a hero guy that you could really kind of fall in love with as the reader, but that the main female character wasn't just sitting back and taking all this. She starts taking self-defense classes, and she works with the guy, as a matter of fact, to learn how to defend herself. And I like that we have that stronger character and that she doesn't just take a backseat to her own safety in this. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a pretty good read, and I definitely was engaged from the beginning. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I was definitely planning to read the second book in the series, but I read some reviews on Goodreads that it's basically just a swapped perspective, and I don't particularly want to read that. But I did enjoy this one and would recommend it to anybody who is looking for a new adult romance fiction. Next up, I read Lucky in Love by Cassie West. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, as I do most of her contemporaries. I absolutely love these, and every year I just love them. And I mean, it's kind of, I feel like they're all typically kind of cliche little romances, but it doesn't matter. Now, I will say this one revolves around our main character winning the lottery, and it seems like the male character in this book is the only one who's not treating her differently after she wins the lottery. And all of her setups are kind of like the meet cutes for these couples, and for them to survive whatever catastrophe it is and find love. I will say though that I think the female character in this was my least favorite female character in a Cassie West book that I've read, but I'm pretty sure the male character Seth was one of my favorites. I love Seth in this book. So a very strong 4 out of 5 for me, and I'm looking forward to the next Cassie West that comes out this month in December, and I am here for it. I am excited. Next up, I read Truly Madly Deeply by Leanne Moriarty, and I don't have a copy of that here for you. I got it from the library, and I read it with my mom, and it was pretty good. I usually like her books, so I was really excited to read this one. I would say of all of hers that I've read so far, this was my least favorite. I don't know why. I think it was just hard to get into the characters. Like, they all seem so strange and kind of unlikable, I have to say. Like, I didn't really like any of the characters in this book, but it did provide a plot twist that I didn't see coming exactly. But I did kind of sense some of the things happening, and I would just say that it's probably one of my least favorite. This revolves around several couples, like most of her books do, with their children, and an incident that happens at a barbecue that they're all attending, and then it takes forever to find out. And I will have to tell you, if it wasn't for her great writing, I probably would have put this book down at the beginning, because I just wanted to know what happened at the barbecue. I had to know, so I kept reading. But if it wasn't for that suspense, I probably wouldn't have, because I just didn't like any of the characters in this one. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was okay, and I didn't get to the end of it, and I did finally find out what happened at the barbecue. Next up, I read Hidden. This is a true story about a survivor during the Nazi invasion of, I believe it was Poland, and this is by Fania Gotsfeld-Heller. Again, I'll put a picture up for this one. This is a middle grade juvenile book, and I read this with the middle school book club, and it was very interesting to hear what the kids had to say. They couldn't believe that this was written by a real person and not a fictional account, because they just couldn't believe that something like this could have happened to this person. And in this case, we follow somebody who doesn't end up at the concentration camps, but she is spending all of the book in hiding in these horrible places. Like, she's basically in this tight little compartment in a barn where she can't even lay down. Like, she's pretty much standing or leaning on the wall the whole time. And it's, of course, got bugs all over it, and they get covered in lice, and they're all starving, and it's just a horrific story. And I liked it, but I didn't like it at the same time. I feel like that's true about every book about the Holocaust. Like, you can enjoy the book, but you also hardly can't enjoy it because it's so horrific that this is true. So I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars, basically because of what I just said. I loved it and hated it at the same time. But it was interesting to read with the kids and hear what they had to say about it. Next, for the high school book club, we read Don't Get Caught by Kurt Dennen. He is a local high school English teacher, so that's why we picked this one, but it was so good. If you haven't read this yet, I would highly recommend it. If you like YA fiction. This was marketed kind of as like an Ocean's 11 is set in a high school, and I would say that was kind of close. Like, it gets you drawn in if you're into that type. This revolves around the Chaos Club, which does all these elaborate pranks at this high school, and at the onset, all of these students are, well, I shouldn't say all, the selection, the main group of characters are lured to the water tower, and they actually are kind of turned in. They're kind of set up to be embarrassed. And they believe the Chaos Club is the ones that set them up. So now they're wanting to get back at the Chaos Club. And it's really interesting to see the kind of breakfast club set up. Like, it's people from different groups all around and how they come together. Who actually set them up and what was happening. I really, really liked this book. I especially liked that it was from a male perspective, and you get a male perspective. I feel like, especially with my high school book club, because we are a group of ladies who are reading these. I don't think we have any guys in our book club. We don't tend to read from male perspective, so that was fun. My favorite thing about this one, though, was the rules. Like, all throughout, they tell you, like, rule number 4, be suspicious. And it's almost like a chapter heading, but it's not exactly. It's always embedded in the story, but it just seems like it leads you through the whole story. And it's all these rules that the main character Max has compiled while watching all of his like Ocean's 11 spy movies. So I think this was really adorable. It was fun, and it was a change of pace for our book club, which we really, really enjoyed. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read All the Crooked Saints by Maggie Stiefvater. This, well, first of all, I knew I was probably going to give it 5 stars anyway because it is Maggie Stiefvater, and I love all of her work. I felt like this was very different from a lot of her stuff, though. This was like almost a historical fiction book. This takes place in the 1960s, and it has to deal with owls and rock and roll and just saints. I don't know. It's in true Maggie Stiefvater form. The most Maggie Stiefvater part of this are the way the saints interact with people. They're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, and people who are lost come to these saints, and they perform the first miracle. And the first miracle makes their biggest fear, biggest obstacle, like a visible physical thing that they can combat. And then the second miracle, the people must perform for themselves in overcoming that. So some of the things that happen to these people who show up, there's one girl it's constantly raining on her all the time after the first miracle is performed. There's another person that grows to be a giant. And all of these are tied into their deepest fears and anxieties. And it really is a fantastical book, but it's really real. It's about kind of being able to find yourself and move on from your fears and really become who you should be. And I loved it. It has all of the lyrical language that we love in Maggie Stiefvater books, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. P.S. If you read this one, listen to the audiobook. It is fantastic. Oh my gosh, Tom Riviera is amazing. Listen to the audiobook. Next up, I read The Bad Guys Volume 2. I don't have it right here, but I will put a picture up. These are short, just very short juvenile books, kind of written in a comic book format about these villainous animals that have grouped together and decide to make a good guys club. And they try to save people and animals and become good guys instead of bad guys, but it usually goes wrong. And these are fantastic. If you have children, you should get this for them because it is so funny, and you'll even enjoy it if you're reading it to them. I love these. For instance, the main character is Mr. Wolf, and they even have like little criminal records for them, so it relates to how the wolf is represented in fairy tales as a bad character, like in Little Red Riding Hood and so on. And it's just so cute. The bad guys usually consist of Mr. Wolf, a shark, a piranha, a snake, and then a tarantula joins their group. And they're just so fun and magical. Next up, I read One Was Lost by Natalie Richards. I read this with my high school book club, and this is kind of a Blair Witch Project sort of book. It revolves around some high school students that have departed from their school on a school trip with 2 teachers. They end up getting separated in the woods. One group is believed to be dead. The other group is with a teacher who is out of commission. He's been poisoned or he's sick or something, and now they're being chased through the woods. Somebody's going through their belongings at night and just messing with them, and it's not until the very end that you find out who it is. And I did have to say I kind of saw this coming, but I know that the kids really enjoyed this, and we did get to speak with her at our book club meeting, and that was so much fun. She Skyped with us during her lunch, so thank you, Natalie Richards. It was such a blast speaking with you, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. There were some elements that I didn't like as much, but I know that we all liked it. It was a fun little October read for us, for our book club, and again, Skyping with her was awesome. Next up, I read The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater, and I will say this has so far been my least favorite Maggie Stiefvater, but I still liked it. It started out really, really slow for me. It revolves around this island where there are horses that can sprout regular legs and crawl out of the ocean and eat you, which is terrifying. It took me so long to get into this book, but I decided to keep reading, and I ended up really liking it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Again, not my favorite, but if you are going to read this, you need to listen to the audiobook once again, because the audiobook is fantastic. Steve West narrates this, at least part of it, the male character, and I think he's one of the best narrators. I love him, so check out the audiobook for this one. And then lastly, I read To Stay Alive by Skilla Brown. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's the story of the Donner Party written in verse, which I feel like is plenty of a description. The Donner Party, in case you're not aware, is a group of people that left kind of the Midwestern part of America and traveled west back in the day, probably the 1800s, and they ran into some hard times and had to resort to some severe measures to stay alive. They were starving, and I guess they did what they had to do. But I think the verse really helped this book. It really kind of helped the pace, helped set the mood, and I think it was really, really well done. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. So there you have it, all the books that I read over the 2 months of September and October. So thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.